Yay!
Yay!
Caught you off guard.
I was ready.
Okay, good. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 268.
We are up there.
Yeah.
I can't believe it's 268. I think I say this every week.
We say the exact same thing at the top of every show.
That's a lot of Mondays.
We're sticking to the script. That is a lot of Mondays. It's 5.5 years of Mondays, and every episode is a new learning experience and a fun adventure with our guests. And tonight, I am giddy. I'm so giddy because we get to have one of the best coaches in the biz on the show to answer everyone's questions regarding running, ultra running, whatever the sport is that you are engaging in now. But he's just so knowledgeable in the sport, the science behind it. He has answers to all of those questions of like, well, why would I do this? It's not just, hey, do this and this works. It's tell me why. And this guest tonight has all that knowledge, all of that extensive background. And so not only does he's going to make a great guest tonight, but he also just coaches some of the best trail runners in the world, is a fantastic trail runner himself, and has all that knowledge. Jason Koop is joining us on the show tonight. I'm very excited.
It's been a while.
It has been a while. I actually haven't looked back at what episode we had Jason on last, but it's been a couple years since we've had him on the show. So long overdue. Very excited. Sit back, relax, everyone. Ginger Runner Live, episode number 268 begins now.
Ginger Runner.
Yay!
I was just trying to figure out when the last time we had Jason on the show was, and I think it was in 2015.
What? So yeah, a couple years.
I could be wrong. I might.
2000.
I feel like we just went through this conversation. We had Sage
did.
Kennedy on the show last week, and it was the same kind of thing where it's like you kind of feel like you see these people and you know these people, but that's like the weird social media thing that gives you that feeling of like, oh, we just had them on the show. Of course, we just had them on the show.
Well, welcome everyone to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 268. As Kim has already mentioned, our guest tonight has been on the show before, but it has been apparently 4 years since he's been on the show. Long overdue. One of the best in the business. Coach Jason Koop will be joining us on tonight's episode to answer all of your questions.
So professional.
Yeah. I added an accent. I figured we might as well get sophisticated at 268 episodes. We'll start now. This gentleman is not only a fantastic ultra runner and a talented athlete himself, he has extensive knowledge in the science of ultra running, running in general, body physiology, and just has that knowledge to back it up, and coaches not only some of the best in the world, but athletes of all abilities, and is able to provide that insight. He's a published author, has books and stuff out there that you can purchase and read and learn. And tonight is going to be one of those episodes where if you have a question about your training, about your goals, your races, we already have a bunch of questions regarding fat adaptation, the good, juicy stuff. We're going to talk about it on tonight's show. So get those questions in the chat room because
I'm in the chat room. You did catch me off guard. I was like trying to think of like, I'm trying to pull all the questions that we already have and kind of get them organized. Yes, you guys, I am in the chat room. We are live. We have Jason here with us. So if you guys do have questions, please pop them in the chat room.
Before we introduce our wonderful guest tonight, we like to start every show by thanking those who help make these shows possible. And that is our Patreon support crew. We like to call them the GR crew. Everyone at the $1 level and above are just helping us do this show weekly now for 5.5 years, every single Monday live. But they're also helping us produce and do our reviews, our films, basically following athletes doing incredible things. We have a film coming from Western States, following Caitlin Gerbin and stuff. We saw Jason there actually very briefly. A lot of stuff happening behind the scenes, and it's because of our Patreon supporters that we're able to do that. 3 individuals in particular at that top tier. Chris Lee in Hong Kong has a great organization called Trailblazer. They showcase a lot of the beautiful trails that Hong Kong has just right outside of city limits. If you find yourself in that region, either racing or as a tourist or just generally traveling through the area, reach out to Chris and his organization Trailblazer. They're fantastic. They'll help you find those trails, those distances that you need. And it's gorgeous there. I know because I've seen pictures. Rick Bjarnason and his team at cheekymonkeymedia.ca, they redid the gingerrunner.com website. You can go there and check it out. It's a beautiful website. They made it very easy for me to update, which is fantastic. A lot of computer programming went into that, but Rick himself is an ultra runner. and he just crushed the Sinister 7, which is one of Canada's toughest ultras, 100 miles. I think it's just over 100 miles, but the conditions sounded brutal. It was super stormy, lots of mud, and he got it done. A huge congratulations to Rick, and he's currently training for Fat Dog 120, which is in just a couple of weeks as well. That back-to-back is next level. So it's
like
really
a
cool to
couple
follow
like
along.
the hardest ones in Canada.
Yeah,
to do.
just a couple of little fun races up there in some of the most wicked mountain ranges on the West Coast. And finally, Brian Sands, longtime supporter, longtime viewer. Brian has been supporting us and inspiring us along the way. He ran his first marathon, first 50K. This is all over the age of 50, and lost over 100 pounds in the process. He's just an inspiring dude and a wonderful member of this community, and has just helped us along the way as well. So big shout out to those 3 individuals for helping us make this all happen.
Before we bring Jason on, there are people confirming in the chat room. It was episode 64, May 5th, 2015. But I will say
64.
that would have been our first live episode as a married couple. That was literally days after we got married.
Hey, high five to us. Like we're high fiving.
We're still married.
We are still married, and we can thank Jason for this.
Yes.
That's what
we owe
tonight's
it all to
episode's all
Jason.
about. We owe it all to Jason. Before the show started, Jason mentioned one of the best references to our old school Ginger Runner Live days, which was we used to sit and do this show on a cooler.
At one time, I would sit in the other room and text you the questions, and then I graduated onto sitting on the cooler beside you.
I'm glad that you graduated to an actual chair, but the fact that Jason remembers that, and I don't know, it's a reference to our history with Ginger Runner Live, and I think it's fantastic. But that is just a testament to how long it's been. And it's so awesome to welcome our guest back after 200 episode hiatus, nearly. Here he is, Jason Koop.
Yay!
Wow. Oof, man. What an intro. Kim, are you an American yet?
I am a Canadian citizen, but an American permanent resident.
American permanent resident. Okay,
Yeah.
well, welcome to the U.S. because that's also transpired, right? Since the last time I was on.
Yes.
Yeah, and I guess it's still an ongoing process as the application process and everything.
Everything takes a long time.
It is not a short process. But yeah, permanent resident, that has been something that's happened since Jason. We got a dog, Jason. I'm trying to think of what we moved. We're in Seattle now.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. What about you, man? What have you been up to? How's life been treating you?
How's the
you?
last 200 Mondays been?
Yeah, the same old, same old. I have a new dog. That's it.
Oh, what kind of dog?
I got an English pointer. German short-haired pointer. I did have 2 English pointers, and one of them passed away in the winter, and we got a German short-haired pointer puppy just about 6 months ago.
Oh. So where are you coming to us live from? Is this the CTS office, or is this Jason Koop's home or office, or what is it?
This is my home office. Yeah, Colorado Springs, Colorado, just where I do the vast majority of my work when I'm not on the road at races.
So I think where I want to start is you just posted this, maybe it was today or yesterday, but your last couple of weeks of training have been stout. You've been logging some serious miles, some real serious elevation gain. Can you kind of catch us up to where you are in your training and potentially what this is for, or is it just for fun?
Well, it's for all of the above. So I'm training for the Tour de Géants in Italy. Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah, most people don't have that reaction. Most people go like, "You're a friggin' idiot." So I've had that race on my radar for a long time, and I was fortunate enough to get in this year. And honestly, I'm just training scared shitless. There's no other way around it. Like, that race is just so big and so intimidating. You know, it's going to take 80 hours or something like that for me to finish. And it's so every day of every week that I have, you know, from here to the race is just going to be spent in complete paranoia on, am I doing enough? Do I have what it takes? Do I have my gear sorted out? Am I doing enough elevation? Blah, 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 blah. So there's very little strategy behind it other than to satiate the paranoia.
So that's actually really interesting. I look up to you as just one of the best coaches in the business. You're very seasoned. You have some of the best athletes under your roster, athletes of all abilities, and you've taken athletes who maybe consider themselves amateur and turned them pro. Like, you have your hands in lots of pots. And so to hear you talk about a race and being scared shitless about it, that's a surprise to me. How do you coach yourself, or do you have a coach, or how do you guide yourself through those experiences that you probably have runners that experience?
Well, it's a funny, I've been asked that question a lot. Like, dude, am I coached? And I'm not. I coach myself, and the real reason is it's kind of an unfair position to put the rest of my colleagues in to like coach their boss. And so I've never asked that of one of my coaches, although they would do it at the drop of a hat. But just think if I didn't perform very well, or I got hurt, or they made some sort of coaching error. Like, it's just a hard, it's just a hard line to kind of cross. So yeah, I do it myself, and I try to practice what I preach, as much as possible. And actually, I feel that I do that really well. I, stick to a schedule, and I lay it out, and I make sure that I'm doing the right things at the right time of year, and then I'm having fun doing it, and then I keep myself healthy, knock on wood. And but still, even with all that and all the experiences that I've had, this one in particular is really it's honestly still a little frightening, just because the enormity of it is really big. And I've coached people before, and so I know how big it is. I mean, I've got the elevation profile on my whiteboard back here that a couple of my athletes gave me a few years ago, and so I get to look at it every day, and I just kind of shake my head at, just how big the whole route is.
It's interesting because, most elevation profiles that I printed out are used for races, like that big. Oh, hey, yeah, there's 3 climbs. And then you look at Jason's and you can tell that it's 40 different summits, 28 different cities, 400 different aid stations. I mean,
stupid.
Those stats
it's
are
stupid. Yeah, I can't. Well, and it's all in Italian too, right? So it's harder to memorize the names, right?
Yeah.
So I know a little bit of Spanish, but I can't understand Italian to save my life. And so even just like pronouncing the names of the cities, and just trying to wrap my head around all that piece of it is also pretty challenging. So anyway, the way that I've described the training process is I'm just scared shitless and trying to satiate that as much as possible.
Is there? I guess this is a two-parter. When you speak to your athletes, you probably talk to them on a regular basis, and they ask you questions about TDG. Do you give them honest answers, or if they're prepping for a race, do you try to sugarcoat it, or how do you phrase the "everything's fine"?
No, I don't sugarcoat anything in life, man. I'm honest about it, and they're curious. They want to know what I'm doing and how I'm feeling about it, and what I've got up to. And a lot of it is I like to show that I've got skin in the game and I'm authentic. And as I mentioned earlier, I practice what I preach, and I dig that about my job and about what I get to do every day. So yeah, I tell them honestly, yeah, I'm scared, and here's what I'm doing, and here's what I did last week, and here's what I think I'm going to do next week, and here's, probably where the failure points are and all that kind of stuff.
I'm fascinated to follow along. I didn't realize it was TDG. So to hear that, it's like, that makes sense.
I think the whole chat room realized it was TDG because everybody was talking about it before we even went live.
Yeah. Just seeing those stats and seeing what you've been up to is like, those are big numbers. Those probably aren't just regular weekly mileages, over 150 miles and 30,000 feet of gain and stuff like that. So this is going to be fun, man. It's going to be fun to follow along as a spectator because I don't have to go through the pain and the suffering.
Well, yeah, you better fasten your seatbelt up for the spectating part, because it's, it takes like 4 days.
Yeah.
So, the race starts on Sunday, and you'll see a couple aid stations pass, and then you get to go to sleep. Then you sleep for 8 or 10 hours, and you wake up. And then we're only like a third of the way through the race.
Right.
You could watch that whole day, and then you go to sleep again, and then wake up, and then watch that whole day, and then go to sleep, and then wake up, and then I might, maybe, if I'm really lucky, be finished then. If I'm doing really poorly, you could wait until Friday. Like you could do a whole work week.
A whole work week. And watch the race while all these idiots are running around the Aosta Valley, and we still won't be finished. It's crazy. It's kind of like what's been going on with Vol State. Like Vol State 500K,
totally absurd.
You're seeing people finishing 9 days later. Like every time I see Keith tweet, like, "Oh, blank has finished in 9 days," I'm like, people are still finishing. Like, that was a week ago.
Yeah, think of all the stuff you've done in that period of time, right?
I
I figured out. So my wife's going to come over and she's going to crew for me. She teaches high school English, and so she's got to kind of like minimize the days that she takes off of work.
Oh, yeah.
They give them a really hard cap on that. And so as we were working through all the logistics, we figured out that she could leave our house in Colorado Springs after I started, drive to Denver, get on a plane, fly from Denver to Geneva, drive from Geneva over into Italy, and still crew for like the last 100 miles of the whole race.
So is that the plan?
No, that's not the plan. But we figured out that that was an option if we wanted to minimize like one or two of those days that she was out of pocket. So that's, like I said, that just like shows the whole absurdity of it. Like the fact that you can go through all of that and still be there for like well over half the race.
That's amazing.
Dumb.
The enormity of it really is crazy.
Wow.
She could go to finals week, test the kids, grade the papers, go back, do cancels with the parents, get on a flight. Amazing.
A lot of life transpires during any ultramarathon race, but for TDG, it's a lot of them.
I want to remind everyone that, of course, we are live with Coach Jason Koop, and we're going to start fielding questions from our live chat room. Kim, you've been very patient. I know we have a ton of questions.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of mash two questions together, one from Nathaniel and one from Mark in the chat room. The questions are, you discussed your fear of TDG. What specifically about TDG scares you? And then Mark's question was, do you have any expectations of yourself?
As we've been talking about the whole time, it's just kind of the enormity of it, and I'm really fortunate that, I've done a lot of pretty hard races. I've done Hard Rock a couple times, and I did Badwater in the hot years, right before they changed the start. Not that it's any less difficult. It's just a different kind of beast. And I've been out at Badwater as crew for, however many years and things like that. But this is easily 2.5 times from a duration standpoint, from a time standpoint, longer than anything I've ever done. Probably 3, maybe even 4 times as long as anything that I've ever done personally. So just the scale of it is definitely a little daunting. And on the expectation side of it, I honestly, I want to finish. Like, I think that'd be a huge win going out there the first time and, finishing the race, and, maybe I'm in 4 or 5 pieces and not 20. I'm definitely not going to finish in one piece. I don't think that's very realistic. But if I get across the finish line across all 330 some odd K, I'll be a really happy camper.
Do you think it's important for athletes to push themselves to these points of things that scare them? Obviously, TDG for some people may be out of their realm or even the wheelhouse at this point, but there are things that do scare them. Is it important for athletes to do this type of thing from time to time or regularly?
I just think as a person, you got to do things every once in a while that scare you. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be athletically either, right? I mean, it can be, emotionally, it can be intellectually, it can be across a lot of different levels. As athletes, and this is, a show that's centered around ultra running and ultra runners, it typically tends to be more physically focused, right? We're doing something longer, faster, higher, multiple days or whatever than we ever have before. But, it can kind of transcend a lot of different areas. I just think it's healthy as a human to do to do anything like that stretches you beyond where you think you can go.
Yeah, I like that. We talk about that a bit on the show, and especially stepping outside the sport. And I love that you bring up pushing yourselves, not necessarily in the sport, but intellectually, emotionally, in all sorts of capacities of life. And we talk about that in various ways on the show for sure. Big supporters of it.
Well, we talked about that when I saw you out in San Francisco right before the book was launched, right? I mean, I was a really reluctant author because I'm not a writer, and I truth be told, I don't like that process. So just that alone, having gone through that process, that's something that was really challenging for me professionally to do, something that I'm not very good at, admittedly. I need a lot of help with it. Like that piece of it alone, like I grow leaps and bounds from that kind of stuff versus like, okay, I'm going to go run 200 miles versus 135 miles. Like, yeah, that's going to be hard, right? But I've done other things in my life that are like way further outside of my my skill set or my my trait attributes or whatever.
Do you get a similar amount of joy when you see one of your athletes crush a huge goal or do something that you could see their potential doing, but they didn't, and then they do something like that? Do you get as much joy out of that experience as you do out of maybe some of your own, like
Mm.
running this race and finishing this race, or Badwater 135 on a hot year?
Yeah.
What are those like?
It's way
comparatively?
more. It's way more when I see my athletes succeed. Way more. It's almost incomparable. I mean, I don't. I mean, so much so I don't like running in the same races as my athletes. In fact, this is one of the reasons I'm in TDGs, because it's such an obscure thing and so hard to get into that like the chances that my athletes would be in it are pretty low. Like, I'll never run Western States again. I'm pretty, I've been pretty public about that as well. It's not that I dislike the race, it's that I'll always have some athlete in it for the
Right.
foreseeable future. And then if for whatever reason I don't, there's no way I'll survive the lottery, right?
Right.
I won't even find out until after the lottery's done. And it's because I just enjoy seeing my athletes succeed so much, right? That anything that I do, from a running standpoint or from a personal standpoint, just pales in comparison. I would far rather be on like the other side of the equation than, just having myself run, because that's just limited to me. When I can be a part of somebody else succeeding, it's always far more fulfilling.
It was an interesting, I don't want to call it a byproduct, but it was an interesting discovery with Tiger Claw, which is the event that we put on. And it was one of those things where let's just put on a fun event that people can come run and get their ass kicked and be done by the afternoon. They can go out and have drinks and stuff and afterwards. But I was really surprised at how much more fulfilling it was to watch those people cross the finish line compared to my own races and that sort of thing. So I love that you say that, because it was something I just discovered, and it was incredible. It was overwhelmingly more positive and beneficial, and just it was really neat. So I can only imagine what it's like as a coach to help guide people through that entire training process and believe in them. Do you have athletes that come to you that don't have that belief in themselves, like that express that I don't think I can do this, and then go and surprise themselves?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons people come to find a coach is because they're kind of searching for that, right? And they might have like 1 or 2 or 5%, inkling that they might be capable of it, but they need a support system in place to like foster and help shepherd them along. And part of that support system can be a coach to bring that out.
Cool. Again, we are live with Jason Koop, Coach Jason Koop, and Kim, you pulled some questions.
Yeah, before we dive into the questions, I was going to say it's always really fun to actually see Jason at events where his athletes are running. Like that to me is something really special, to see a coach come to the event and just support his athletes and just be there.
Yeah. And it'll like Lake Sonoma is a perfect example. Every time that you've been running at Lake Sonoma, I get the benefit of spectating and getting to hang out or crew or pace or that. Well, they don't have pacing, but like crewing and that sort of thing. And then I'll see Jason Koop. I'll be like, yes, Jason Koop is here. I'm going to see what his athletes are doing, catch up. It was the same at States, like seeing him cheer on his athletes and stuff at States. It was always really cool. And you'll see Jason at all sorts of events across the country too, which is cool.
If you see me there, though, I always have to couch this a little bit. I apologize in advance if I have to cut and run, because there's always somewhere to be. I mean, at Western States, I'll be at like 14 different aid stations or something like that throughout the course of a day, and I spend way more time behind the wheel of a car than I do actually physically at the aid stations, which is really sad. So yeah, if you do see me at a race, say hi, but don't be offended if I just say I gotta go. It's not you. It's usually got to be somewhere.
It had been a couple years since we'd been back to States to film, and it was the same thing that we ran into of, oh, okay, we get to hang out at Forest Hill for a little bit and catch up with people. And within 5 minutes, it's like, oh, shit, we got to get back in the car and we got to drive this way and go down there and do this. So I can only imagine for you with all the athletes out there running, it's a lot more check in, hop in the car, drive.
Drive.
Okay, sorry, Kim, I keep cutting you off.
Shall we jump into
it? We've been talking about this before the show.
Say.
I know what we're going to say. Go for it.
All right. So there's been a number of questions rolling in about the fat adapted.
I'll preface it by saying Jason has been very public about his I don't want to say arguments, but data analyzing of people coming forward and saying, hey, cut out carbs, adapt your body to fat burning, like low carb, high fat, that sort of thing. And Jason has a point of view that I think is opposed to that, but backed up by data. And I'm really curious to hear what Jason has to say regarding these questions here.
Yeah, so great question from Nathaniel in the chat room. They write, Jason, you wrote about receiving a lot of commentary about your fat adapted diet stance. Others say receive criticism for speaking about their diets. Why does diet talk draw so much passion?
Oh God, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but the comment is correct. I mean, it's like a religion, and it's. I tell you what, if you talk to a lot of the really high level RDs, which I have dialogue with on a daily basis, they are pulling their hair out right now. And
really?
It's crazy. Yeah, the same. I've been really fortunate to work with some very high level people in nutrition, registered dietitians, and things like that. They're all over at the training center, which is right next door, and just because I've been in the game for so long. And this fat adaptation strategy is not anything new. I think this is the third time that it's come around in my coaching career, and it just has these natural ebbs and flows,
different labels, different sort of marketing twists, and
and so every time it's okay. This is what the messaging is, and here's what we think. Is there anything new that came up from a research and a science perspective? Let's look at that and let's figure out what we want to do. But for whatever reason, each ebb and flow, and I think this might have to do with just the way that social media allows certain influencers to kind of punch above their weight, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Every ebb and flow that comes along, those peaks and the support and the kind of the fervor that people get around diet gets higher and higher and higher. And it doesn't matter like what side of the fence or the debate you're on or anything like that. Both there's more than two sides, by the way. Every side just kind of amps up their argument, it seems, every time this concept rolls around. And so I really don't know how to like pinpoint why it's so polarizing and why people treat it like a religion, other than the fact that social media has given these people platforms. There's actually an article in the New York Times about this just today that I saw. It gives these people a platform, or it gives everybody, right? It gives everybody a platform to which they can opine on. And a lot of times what happens, the people that are opining they're either punching above their weight from an influence perspective, or, and this is the point of this New York Times article, they're punching above their weight from an education and a knowledge perspective. And that can actually be really dangerous in like a public health setting where people are disseminating just bad health information to, whoever their Twitter followers are and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been talking about it more and more just in our personal lives and stuff like that. And it's been interesting to see the influencer culture sort of take over a lot of different paradigms. This one, I mean, diet, and I hate the word diet, but like nutrition and that sort of thing has been so easy for people to grasp onto and gain influence in purely by spouting a specific point of view. And that whether that point of view is right or wrong, or works for some or doesn't work for others, it's been really interesting to sort of see that rise in that culture and how it has become this sort of religion where if you don't agree, you're wrong, or you don't have the data to back it up, or maybe you do and it doesn't matter. It's crazy. It's crazy how much it's become this fervor. So you mentioned RDs. I'm curious about that. Are they being approached by athletes and saying, like, aid stations need to have
registered dietitians?
Oh, I was thinking race directors.
No, sorry, registered
the
dietitians.
other RD.
But RDs could apply for an RD.
I like also Kim Subtle. Like, it's okay, it's okay. Registered dietitians, who we are actually going to have an RD on our show next Monday, which is fantastic. But
yeah, whoever you have will probably say the same thing. But yeah, every time I've had dialogue with any of the people that I work with professionally in the nutrition sphere, for whatever reason, this time around, the last 18 months or so, they're just really pulling their hair out.
So what? Go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead.
I was just going to ask, what is the take on it? Is it not good for a human body to work solely off of proteins and like completely removing carbs? Is there a right or wrong answer? Is there an argument one way or the other that will help lead people in the right direction for themselves?
Well, so first off, so Kim mentioned, the article that I positioned is I'm not in favor of chasing that adaptation, and I break the argument up into two pieces. The first piece is the research piece, which we know, and we know that when you ingest foods, your body is good enough to adapt to utilize those foods as fuel.
Mm-hmm.
So if you eat carrots, your body's going to adapt and use those carrots as fuel. If you eat bacon, your body's going to adapt and be able to use that bacon as fuel. And so it's not surprising to me, and it shouldn't be surprising to anybody, that when you have a high fat diet, you're going to burn more fat. That's completely logical. It's in our biology, and humans have, adapted their way of eating for thousands of years. So I get that the strategy in terms of manipulating your dietary intake in order to burn more of a certain substrate, and the substrate in question this time is fat, it works. It absolutely works. The but, or the caveat to that is as endurance athletes and as ultramarathon athletes in particular, we are really good at burning fat anyways, just because we're running so much. Just the sheer act of running. We talk about my training, right? I did basically 30 hours for the last 3 weeks, right? 30 hours of aerobic training for the last 3 weeks. Just doing that for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks produces almost all of these fat adaptation things that you can get just through the training. And so manipulating your diet to get the last little functional sliver of that, I don't think is really worth chasing. So that's the first piece on the scientific side of it. The second piece is, for most of those fat adaptation strategies, one of the linchpins in it is you have to restrict calories in some way.
Right.
So you're either running in a fasted state, or you're running with low carbohydrate availability, or you're running without taking in, carbohydrates during the exercise. Some way you're manipulating your diet such that your calories are either being restricted chronically or acutely, or both. Anytime you do that, and some people legitimately need to lose weight, right? I'll just say that from the get-go. Some people that are using fat adaptation strategies to cut their calories and lose weight, they'll probably get a bigger performance benefit just from that weight loss than they will from the running.
Right.
That happens a lot in overweight endurance athletes. But let's put that aside for right now, right? Just talk about the fat adaptation specifically. So when you're cutting these calories in some way to create these fat adaptation strategies, the risk that you always run is getting injured, or getting overtrained, or under-rested, whatever vocabulary that you want to use for that. And the upside for the fat adaptation compared to the downside of being overtrained or having a relative energy deficiency syndrome, or any of these other kind of myriad of things that can happen when you're running into an energy deficit, the positive negatives is just way out of balance. Once again, you can get a couple % performance improvement, maybe on the fat adaptation side. But if you lose a week of training because you've hurt yourself because you're chronically undernourished, all that plus more just kind of goes out the window. So the second thing on the science side is just a risky proposition when you're looking at the entire context of training to say, okay, I'm going to get fat adapted. In order to be fat adapted, I've got to restrict calories in some way. The risk for restricting those calories is potential injury, overtraining, underresting, whatever syndrome that you want to, whatever label that you want to put on that. It's just not a good way to look at how to improve the athlete as a whole. So there's a couple pieces just on the science side of why I don't really agree with that strategy. But the bigger point of why I dislike fat adaptation as a strategy, and this goes way beyond any of the science or any of the performance stuff, is it's not a healthy way to look at food. We need to look at food as something that nourishes us and enables us to complete the things that we want to do every day. whether that's running or sitting at a desk typing or walking my dog. Like, that's what we need to view food as, not as something that needs to be manipulated like in some sort of biochemistry experiment to get higher rates of fat utilization. Like, that's just not a healthy way to look at the stuff that we're putting in our bodies, to have like such a restricted list. Like, I can't eat all of these things because I'm completing this biochemistry experiment to become fat adapted. I would rather look at food as something that nourishes me and makes me healthy and makes me feel good. So it's for that reason primarily that I dislike that strategy. Is I just don't think it's a healthy way of looking at our diets and all the science stuff. I mean, yeah, those are great reasons, right? I mean, I think if there were a performance benefit for being a fat adapted ultramarathon runner, shit, yeah, I would have my athletes do it. Like, I have athletes that are interested in winning. They want to win races. And so, yeah, I would 100%. It would be unprofessional of me as a coach to not promote that strategy if I thought an athlete could get better or win a race because of that. So it's not that I'm against it from, for whatever kind of random reason. I just don't see it as practical from the standpoint of how we view food. And I just don't think that ultimately, like, the performance gains for athletes are worked there when you look at the entire context of the picture. I try to keep that rant as short as possible.
No, I mean, honestly, man, I'm sitting here the whole time going, I want to talk to Jason just about this forever. And I know that we are going to be doing a nutrition episode next week with Maria Dalzat, who we talked about.
And Maria's actually in the chat room.
Oh, great.
As well.
She got a bee sting. Maria, I hope you're doing better. Yeah, she got a bee sting that looked like it was pretty bad. But we're going to have her on next week's show.
So just a couple tidbits from Maria. I know we will have her on the show next week. But Maria just said, people are desperate for the answer. How can I be bigger, better, faster, stronger right now? So they draw to the more interesting narrative that is based on an experience or an unsupported claim to try and get themselves there.
Yeah, and so, I love that you brought up, Jason, just the relationship with food. I feel like there's some really great dialogue happening now amongst some of these endurance athletes who are bringing up their own personal relationships with food. I've had my personal relationships with food, and creating your own paradigms and your own miseducated or misguided sort of choices. I love that it's just looking at it as nourishment for your body and what you want your body to do. It's as simple as that. So if someone comes to you with hey, I would love for you to be my coach, Jason. I am doing adaptation, or I'm trying to put myself into ketosis. Would you have the advice of, let's maybe relook at this? Or would it be, sure, do your thing, just be aware that there are pitfalls?
Well, I have that. I mean, that's not a completely like out of this world statement. I mean, that probably happens every week or every other week where I have a new athlete that comes to me and says just that. And I take the same approach that I just mentioned is, okay, let's look at food first as the stuff that's going to fuel you for all of your activities in life. And after we look through food through that lens, does it make sense to do this? Does it make sense to do that? Or does it make sense to do this other thing? So I take the labels off of it first, right? Because I find that is something that's very emotionally charged, right? Once we add these labels to them for whatever reason, and maybe you're a nutritionist or dietitian that you're having come on the show can explain better why these are such charged words. But I take the labels off of it first. And then I present the situation in that fashion. We're going to use fuel, or we're going to use food, or look at food as what fuels you from a running perspective, from a life perspective, and then make choices based off of that. And sometimes there is some, well, I wouldn't call it low carb, but what I would call is nutritional periodization that happens because of that, where we're manipulating some of the macronutrient contents. But a lot of times what happens is just by opening up the dialogue and like from a completely different lens, right? Not through the lens of the macronutrient lens. This is how much protein, fat, carbohydrate you're going to take in, but the lens of
just froze, Jason. Jason just froze.
Oh,
yeah. Give it a second. I'm going to, I think Jason's either getting another call or we're going to actually have to call him in. That's okay.
Okay.
That's what we'll do. Let me just recall Jason, get him back on air. But I'm already just sitting here going, yes, yes, yes. Sorry, Jason, we lost you, but we'll get you back on here. Boom. Easy as that. Sorry, keep going.
I don't know, where did I break off? It was in the middle of something really important, I'm sure.
It was talking about, so the athletes come to you. They have their own ideas of what they want, but you'll go through those periods where you work it out with them, and it opens up. You have the additional dialogue with them about food. You were twisting the dialogue with that athlete. I don't know if that helps you bring back the thoughts.
Yeah. So my point with that is I remove the labels, the low carb, high fat, high carb, ketogenic, whatever. I remove those labels first, and then we have a dialogue about what do you need to fuel the activities that you want to do: running, fishing, hiking with your kids, walking your dog, being a professional, whatever you are. And then what I find through that dialogue is we kind of come to the right answer. And sometimes that results in a more of a periodized approach to nutrition, right? If they want to lose a little bit of weight, or they just want to kind of like play around with how they feel on certain diets. Sometimes that's the outcome of that. But I just feel that by kind of changing the orientation.
I don't know why it keeps doing that. Jason, I don't know if you can still hear us. Reconnecting or network connection. We'll get it figured out. There you are. He's back.
Yeah, I don't know where I keep dropping off. Maybe it's all of the dietary haters out there that are
someone's hacking a Skype.
I would not put it past anybody. Like I said, it is so charged.
Someone's sitting outside Jason's house just like hacking his network. I'll show you ketosis. Regardless, we were definitely getting what you were saying about depending on what the ultimate athletic goal is of the person, and taking out those labels and allowing them to sort of find their place within that. I'm sorry that it kept cutting out. I'm not sure what happened. But the freeze frames are fantastic. Obviously, very, very good freeze frames. I know that we could talk about that for a bit. There's something else I want to talk to Jason about, and that's just dealing with athletes and emotion and injury and stuff. Obviously, Dylan Bowman, we've had on the show recently, is going through some stuff right now. Get well, Debo, and Jason's his coach, and I'm just curious how to deal with athletes in that capacity. Before we get into that conversation, though, we have some live questions, and we'll get to a couple of those, and then we'll finish up.
Well, my next question actually kind of ties into where you want to take the conversation. So Connor Drew is in the chat room, asks, how do you support athletes through the unfortunate but unavoidable parts of running, like DNFs or injuries?
Well, it starts way before even the DNF or the injury, even the injury actually occurs. Is I always try to have a relationship with my athletes that goes beyond the X's and O's. And yeah, most of the time they come, they just want to know what to do, right? Like your dietitian mentioned, right? They just want the answer. They want to know what they need to run on Tuesday and what they need to run on Wednesday and things like that. And from the very beginning of the coaching process, I put a far bigger emphasis on making sure that there's a personal connection. And, a lot of times it's easy when you know the person and you've seen them at races and things like that. But, when you've never met them, which I coach a lot of people I've never met before, overseas, I coach a lot of people that are also overseas, right? You have to take the time to nurture that personal relationship that you can have between two people, whether it's in a physical setting or an internet setting or virtual setting or whatever. So all that support starts from minute one, day one, hour one of the coaching process and creating that connection. And then what I find through that is, because since you've created a personal relationship with the athlete, then they can not only lean on you for the technical advice, how much carbohydrate should I eat,
right,
during, we'll see if the internet connection stays up for this next one. How much carbohydrate should I eat for this run?
You're not freezing yet.
Yeah, good. But they'll also lean on you for the emotional side of it. So not only when they get injured, it's one thing to get an injury and to say, okay, take 2 weeks off and do these exercises and things like that. But it's another thing completely, and in my opinion, way harder from a coaching perspective, to help guide the athlete through the emotional component of that injury or that DNF or that low point. And it's because of the personal relationship that you've intentionally fostered with an athlete that you're able to like help once again be that shepherd for them through that emotional piece. So there's no one size fits all answer. It's not like I've got like a 5-step program to get,
Right.
Dylan through an ankle roll or something like that written on, a Post-it note on my desk. But because I've known Dylan for so long and because we have such a good personal relationship,
Sure.
I just know how to give him comfort and, know when to give him a hug and know when to, kick him in the butt and tell him to, quit being poopy pants or, whatever the situation kind of dictates. So it all kind of gets rooted in just like knowing an athlete on a personal level.
So you build that relationship with your clients. Like, do you take that time in the initial stages of bringing a client in where you have those discussions with them and sort of dig as deep as you can?
Yeah, I mean, I try to build a relationship that, like I said, it goes beyond the X's and O's. And so I intentionally, instead of just, throwing a schedule up on Training Peaks, right, which is a lot of what my job is, run 2 hours on Tuesday or whatever it is, I give them a call, ask them about their family. I'm genuinely interested in their, hobbies and activities and things like that. And they are generally interested in mine, right? We're talking about that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And, what that does is it just provides a, a door to be open for whenever whenever there is a really trying time and they need to lean on you for more than just like tactical and technical advice, right? When they really need somebody to just like pull them out of the dumps for whatever reason. Sometimes that even goes beyond coaching. I mean, sometimes that kind of trickles into their personal life. And that's another issue that,
Sure.
that really good coaches have to deal with, like how to keep and blur and maintain that personal and professional relationship, if that makes any sense, because you do have to blur the lines at some point and you do have to create boundaries at other points. And it's a really tricky balance to strike. But anyway, I think it's all really rooted in just having a personal connection with the athletes that I work with.
Fantastic answer to find out a little bit more about that. But yes, Kim has some questions.
Jason, you tweeted something a few days ago that resonated with me and my experience with different coaches that I've had over the years. Jason tweeted out, a big part of coaching is using the following tools. 1, a shoulder to cry on. 2, an ear for listening. 3, a heart for empathy. 4, arms for a hug or a high five. And 5, open eyes and mind to see the big picture.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was incredible and speaks volumes to your coaching style as well.
Yeah. Was there I realized when you posted that, I think we both read it and we both kind of shared it with each other and found ourselves nodding our heads and stuff like that, because relationships with running or any sport can become emotional relationships,
and complicated.
It's not just hey, I'm going to go for a run and that's it. And once it's done, I'm riding the high. Especially in ultra, there's just roller coasters all over the place. How long did it take you to sort of develop that 5-step process, or was it literally just something that you figured out? This is kind of what I do.
Well, so a lot of those tweets like are quite literally like motivated by something that kind of had recently happened, and that one in particular. We have coaching calls every week with our ultra running coaching group. We've got 7 people strong in our within our ultra running coaches, and we get on this continuing ed type of call, a professional development call, every week religiously. I'll use that word since it's been thrown around a lot. We get on, and the topics range. Sometimes they're very technical topics where we take, something that's come up in the literature and we bat it around. Sometimes we review athlete schedules and on and on and on and on. And I relish very much my role as a mentor and someone who can develop coaches. And I take a very hands-on approach with that whenever we hire new coaches. And one thing that I've learned from that consistent mentorship process that we go through every week is that it is far, far easier, and it's still really hard, but far easier to teach the X's and O's of coaching. Okay, here's how the cardiovascular system works, and here's how this works, and here's what VO2 max means, and here's why we get blisters, and all these the scientific stuff. Here's why, fat adaptation might work or might not work, and blah, 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 right? All that technical stuff is far, far easier to coach than the 5 points that are far easier to train a new coach on than those 5 points that I mentioned. That takes a lifetime, something that I constantly am working on myself, even though I've been doing it for 20 years. It takes a lifetime to consciously develop and have good mentors around you that can help, facilitate how to, work through those situations and be empathetic and all of those things. It's way, way harder to teach and mentor coaches on how to do that than the technical side of it. And so that was the motivation behind it. It was kind of literally something that, that came up as a byproduct of, one of our weekly mentoring sessions.
Well, it resonated. It was timely.
That's cool.
And I feel like a lot of what you've been posting as of late is timely, and it's relevant to a lot of people, whether it's influenced by something someone notable has said or opened up about. But we really appreciate that. We really appreciate that openness from a coach's perspective as well. And, part of bringing Jason on tonight was also to showcase just the multitude of coaches that are out there. We've had other coaches on the show in the last couple of years since we've had Jason on, and it's there's so many diverse perspectives and stuff like that. But there's some commonalities in coaches that we really respect, and Jason's one of the coaches that we look up to highly. And what a lot of what we talked about tonight are, I'm so glad we got to mention a lot of those things, because a lot of those things are the things we look to Jason for guidance on. Giving his athletes love, compassion, grace, talking about how they're all right.
Carbs are okay.
Carbs are okay. I mean, we look up to Jason because he thinks carbs are okay.
Yeah,
so.
Good. That's my only saving grace. I've served my purpose in life.
If you guys have any questions about carbs, it's Jason or J Coop at Train Right. Actually, Jason, I do want to give you a chance to let people know where they can find you on social media. We're going to wrap up the main show, by the way, because we've picked Jason's brain not even remotely in its entirety, but we are going to move into an after show with Jason and ask him some residual questions for Patreon subscribers. Before we do that, we're going to have a lot of people that are going to want to reach out more, Jason, find out more information, have questions, send you hate mail about why meat is great. Where can they find you? Where can they reach out? Where can they follow you and all that good stuff?
First off, I love all the comments that I get on social media. So send those my way, right? It's just Jason Koop at Twitter, last name spelled with a K, Jason Koop on Instagram, or Jason Koop on Facebook. Pretty easy to find me. And whether you agree or disagree, I'm always really civil about it. I mean, I've done podcasts with the keto people and the fat adapted people, and so on and so forth. And I always keep it in a respectful but disagreeable tone, if that makes any sense. The comments a lot end up on my whiteboard. A lot of my whiteboard is just like ideas for articles and content and things like that. And so I really do appreciate the feedback. And even when it's, hey, I disagree with you, or you're an idiot, or whatever, then it's always banter for something. And I always learn something. We were talking about this before the show opened up. Anytime I get an opportunity to get feedback on anything, whether it's something I posted or something that one of my athletes did, or even, with our other coaches and our coaching group, I love hearing that feedback, because it's incredibly hard to get all of that. You hear, 2% of the feedback that is actually kind of floating around whenever you're in the public space. And so I always relish the opportunity to, hear that, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent.
Before we even wrap up the show, I also realized that Jason had a great dialogue with Killian Jornet today regarding efficiency, running versus walking economy, and that sort of thing. Can you speak on that, or do you want to save that for the after show?
So one of my pet peeves, I'll just turn it into a joke, right? One of my pet peeves is when people use biomechanical or physiological terms incorrectly. Like when they confuse efficiency and economy, which there might be like 100 people on Earth that give a crap about the difference between those two the physiological setting, and I'm one of those people. But that is one of my pet peeves. And so when Killian goes and he says, this is running versus walking economy, I'm like, no, it's not what economy is. Like, economy means something like completely different. But anyway, that was the root of that. It was more kind of lighthearted more than anything else. But both of us brought up a good point, right? There's this big, huge mystery in the trail and ultra running world that where is it? Right here. It's somewhere on my whiteboard. Somewhere right here, I think. So anyway, there's this big, huge mystery is what is better from a performance standpoint, to walk or to run, to use poles, not to use poles. And we actually have an intern right now that is in an undergraduate program at the University of Colorado, which is significant because they have one of 2 treadmills in the entire world that will go up to a 45-degree slope, so they can actually do all these steep running types of studies. Yeah. And so he's pulling like all this inordinate amount of, this is what our interns do. He's pulling like all this inordinate amount of research on running versus walking and steep grade hiking and using poles and things like that. And we're going to build a little article about, what we know and what we don't know about running versus walking and using poles and economy and performance and things like that. And it'll be a fun little article, but it's poignant because of what Killian has pointed out.
Scientifically supported research and data analysis. I can't wait to see that article come out.
It will not be nearly as charged as nutrition, though. Running versus walking, people are like, meh, whatever. You talk about like fat versus carbs, and like people start putting their dukes up.
I was actually surprised to see Joe Gray. We haven't had on the show before, but his conversation with Killian regarding polls and like Tiger Claw, we don't allow polls, but it's interesting to see how many people are passionate about bringing polls to steep races. And I was actually surprised at that sort of charged argument. Like there's actually like some pretty there's opinionated people out there.
It's the internet. People argue about anything.
Regardless, Jason Koop, we cannot thank you enough for joining us on the show tonight. I feel like we could easily have talked another hour with Jason. We are going to move into our after show with the man, ask some residual questions that didn't get asked during the main show here. If you would like to join us, you can do so at Patreon. But again, Jason, just real quickly, remind people where they can find you on social media so they can follow up.
Yep, Jason Koop everywhere. Jason Koop, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Trainright.com is the website for all of our coaching packages and camps and things like that. But yeah, easiest way to send me hate mail is through social.
Perfect. Thanks to our wonderful guest tonight, Jason Koop, for dropping some serious knowledge and just having a really good conversation about a lot of the topics that we have wanted to talk about on this show. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we will have Maria Delzat on the show next week, a RD, a registered dietitian. She'll be
We
joining
had a
us.
double RD in the chat room tonight. We had a race director who was also a registered dietitian.
Dang. That's a small niche. But it's going to be another fantastic show next week. I think we'll probably get into some of this like very similar conversations and maybe try to pull them apart and get a little bit more
It might
nuance
get heated next week.
I'm excited. Like Jason doesn't know this, but we had a conversation with Maria a couple weeks ago at Western States regarding some of the very similar topics of conversation. And she was getting really passionate about it. And I was like, this is fantastic. Pause the conversation. You're coming on the show. We're going to talk about it. So I love that we got a chance to kind of ease into it with Jason tonight. Next week, we'll get a little bit.
Just bring like backup generators and internet redundancy and, everything that you can think of, because inevitably something I'm surprised my power is still on.
We'll bring backup modems. We'll connect to 6 different internet frequencies.
We could drive to Maria's house if we really needed.
We literally could. If for some reason the internet craps out, we'll go do the show from her house. But we're going to do an after show with Jason Koop at patreon.com/thegingerrunner. For as little as $1 a month, you support everything we do here. Live shows, reviews, films, cool projects like GRGR, which is a Ginger Runner Global Run. Registration opens for that in a couple of weeks. And Patreon members will get a first look at that, first opportunity to register, which is going to be pretty fun. And that's pretty much it. But we're going to have Jason join us for about maybe 10 or 15 minutes in the after show and ask some additional questions. Am I forgetting anything?
Oh my God. Crew member of the week.
At the end of every show, we like to recognize members of the community who have gone above and beyond, have crushed it out there, accomplished goals, or faced fears head on and done some pretty incredible things. We like to call it our GR crew member of the week. Kim, Who is our GR crew member of the week?
This week's GR crew member of the week is Daniel Oakley. Daniel says, had a rough past 12 months with both physical and mental health issues, but kept up some basic training and got back out there for the Seafair Triathlon again this year, which is just in our backyard.
That is in our backyard.
Here.
I didn't realize the triathlon was this last weekend.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Congrats, Daniel. Daniel posted a bunch of pictures in the Facebook group as well. So
Sweet.
Go check them out.
Congratulations, Daniel. You are our GR crew member of the week. If you would like to be a GR crew member of the week, just go for it. Shoot for the stars.
Share your stories in the Facebook page.
I like that just go for it.
Go for it.
Just do what you got to do. But seriously, share your stories with us. On our Facebook group, we post a question at the beginning of the weekend and the end of the weekend. We'd like to hear what you were up to.
I'm always watching.
Kim is always watching. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 268. We cannot thank you enough for the support. We'll see you in the after show if you're on Patreon. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Get out there, train hard, race harder, and party the hardest. I know I am. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Goodbye.
Ginger